Hi, my name's Jay Neal, and today on this video we're going to cover valve codes. We're going to try to get her straightened out this time, so stay tuned. Valve codes. Where they come from? What are they? How did we get in this mess we're currently in? I don't know, but here we are. This is going to probably be one of the harder parts of this and the last part of this video series. And it's going to be one of the harder parts to explain, valve codes. Valve codes, where'd they come from? You know, back in the day, it was simple. We had a number, a 3, a 4, a 5, and shocks had, a 3-3 associated to them. Or a 3-5. So a 3-3 is what they call a non-split valve, and a 3-5 is what we call the split valve. Okay, the secret was all shocks are split valve. All of our twin tube shocks that we have are split valves because I'm going to say I don't know where the code come from or who first invented it or who laid numbers to it. I really don't know. But I'm going to probably give Monroe credit for that, okay? And their engineers there decided that they wanted more rebound than compression. So a 3-valve shock has more rebound in it. The spring controlled the compression bump, and the shock controlled the rebound of the spring. So I'll show you our standard code values that we use a lot. We don't use them really anymore. We do kind of go off of those numbers for a generic high speed or high speed for a code. We don't really do a code number, say 5.5 in a standard shock. We do some in the mod lights in the 12 and 13 series. So I'll show you that code. And as you can see, most of them had, or all of them had rebound heavy. Okay, Bilstein come out and they had a 160-160 or a 30-30, they called it. And they were the same. And I agree with that. And we followed that suit because if you want a split valve, then ask for a split valve, you know, is how we got there. In today's world, everything is about tie down, okay? But in the mod lights in a 12 series shock, we still do a 30-30, a 50-30, a 40-20, a 20-40. We still do them shocks, but we don't really, we don't in our full size stuff. So valve codes were pretty good as a standard until we started redefining low speed, and really only in the last few years. But really where valve codes just went off the deep end was when we started having all these shock builders. So it only makes sense when you have, 12,000 people doing shocks that none of them are going to be the same. And yes, I would be all in favor of a generic or a standard code system. That would be great if all shock builders use the same code as far as high-speed valve numbers. It's never going to happen on a low-speed level, but if we all use the same code on a high-speed. Now, when we start manipulating bleed, then we just get in complete trouble. But valve codes, they basically went from 1 to 10 or 1 to 9, really, and that's where everybody was. Nobody really had advertised numbers over 10 or 9. And in today's world, I don't see them. They may be out there. I really don't use them, so I don't really go looking, but I don't know that anybody has valve codes over 10. But the generic code, like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, those were numbers represented to a 10-inch level. So the dyno's at a speed of 10 inches per second, and it creates a number. And as you can see from the chart, those numbers were associated with a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. That was high speed. High speed is the 10-inch number on the dyno, or if you are dynoing at faster speeds. Nowadays, guys dyno at slower speeds. Old timers still dyno a lot at 10 inches. Some of the newer guys dyno at 6, and the reason being, well, it's because what you get used to. You know, if you grew up on a 10-inch number, it's easier to associate a shock on a 10-inch number. There's no harm. I don't feel like there's no harm or foul in it. If you use a 10-inch number and you make this shock work on this car or this style of car, then it works. It doesn't really matter. If you can communicate with your customers, I think that's really all that matters. So we do our stuff at high speed. We do our stuff at 10-inch. The 10-inch number has a purpose in the shock build, but we don't identify shocks by their 10-inch number. We don't do that because it's not really relevant anymore because of all the different builders. You know, a 5, for an example, is not going to be the same across the board. So high-speed shocks back in the day didn't have any emphasis on bleed. So like for an example, the QA1, they had 2 bleed sizes. I don't really remember what they were. 60 thousandths was one of them. I don't really remember what the other one was, but used one from 1 to 4, and then from 5 to 9, you used the other. Just the way it was. Bilstein, on the other hand, used an 8 bleed shim, an 8 full bleed on just about everything they built. So you could look at a lot of shocks back when we used 30-30, 50-30 as a build type reference. A lot of the shocks, 1-inch, 2-inch, 3-inch numbers in a Bilstein were the same. The high-speed pressures that went up drugged the low-speed numbers along with it. So that was the only variable that was there, was that. So that, you know, a 30-30, a 3.5, a 5.3, a 9.2, these are high-speed numbers. They're not low-speed numbers. They're high-speed numbers. The way we call out a shock, right front 1-75. This is a low-speed call out. The right front 1 indicates that the low speed's been modified. It's not a standard bleed. It's using a smaller bleed circuit, or in our case, we use a smaller bleed shim. A right front 1-75. The 75 is the 1-inch number on the dyno when we dyno the shock. So the 1-inch, 2-inch, 3-inch numbers are falling into place through the bleed circuit, and that's what it means. So we start at 50, right front 1-50. The right front, the left front, and the right rear are indicated this way because of bleed, because of rebound being more important. So right front 1-50, as the number gets bigger, 75, 100, 125, then the rebound gets bigger. And those are a 7, 8, 9, and a 10 valve. And then after that, we change into a different format. But the bleed in them shocks, like I said, as the number gets bigger, the rebound gets bigger. The high speed's there to support the low speed. And those shocks have bleed on, so the car gets on the nose, gets off the nose. Sometimes on an open motor car, or more than sometimes on an open motor car, we favor that type of build because the car and guys have a tendency to want to turn the car with throttle. Now, I think in the last couple of years, we've gotten better about that. And we're starting to slowly move into, on an open motor program, into more of a gorilla fist type shock, a 0-point shock. We don't in the UMP market so much, but sometimes because they're still heavily racing on cushions and heavy racetracks, and that changes really how everything's done. So low speed is your 1, 2-inch, 3-inch numbers, okay? understand the slower you dyno, so there can be a wide variety of low speed numbers. They can go from hundreds of pounds to 100 pounds. And they can do this because of how the shock's dynoed, how the dyno's set up, what graph you're looking at, how you're placing the zero. We'll go over that maybe in another video sometime of how we set the dyno for the 0 point. But depending on what chart you're looking at, really depends on how the number is. Okay, so if you dyno slower, for an example, then the number is going to go up. And some guys will be like, oh, I'm 325 pounds at 1 inch. Well, that can be a true statement. Well, it is a true statement, but it also depends heavily on how the shock is dynoed. So without knowing how it's dynoed or what speed you're dynoing at, then it's hard to determine. So the speed of the dyno is not really important into the valving number other than what people say, okay? But this is something that's going on, so that's why I'm trying to explain it. Bleed in a gas shock is what allows, when you push the shock in, the shaft in, and it comes back out, that's bleed. Bleed allows us to push the shock in. On a twin tube, it allows us to pull the shock out. So it allows the shock to go in and out by hand. That's bleed, okay? It's not measurable. Guy will take a shock, push it in, goes, oh, I don't think it's stiff enough. Oh, I mean, you can't even remotely, you can, but it's weak at best, okay? Pushing the shock in and watching it come out to judge how much rebound you have, there's variables here that come into play: gas pressure, base valves. A lot of times guys will do a base valve shock and they'll go, oh, I think it's got too much tie down in it. Well, it's got 30 pounds of gas in it. That's why it doesn't shaft out. Regardless of the tie down, it still isn't going to shaft out very fast. So there are some things you can do. This was a thing of the past when guys would push a shock in and kind of make a judgment on that shock. It was a thing of the past. It is a thing of the past. So what you need to kind of understand is we may give you a high-speed number as a complementary thing. It's a 10 rebound. It's a 9 rebound. Okay, that's based on our chart and solely on our chart. So another shock builder could be using a completely different chart, and his 9 or 10, like for an example, our left rear numbers are kind of low. I mean, we're out there 400 pounds on an 8 valve, and that's pretty high. 500 pounds on a 10. That's getting up there. A little bit of, that's getting up there in number, for a 10. So other companies are in a 12 or a 14. I've heard 19 numbers or 22 numbers, and this is why we got to be a little careful, because a 22 rebound and a 14 rebound can easily be the same shock, from different builders. So we got high speed, that's at 10 inches per second on the chart. We got low speed, that's the 1, 2, 3 numbers. The high speed is what you see when you hit a bump. The low speed is what controls the spring return in the car. It holds posture in the car. That's and the bleed, the amount of bleed is what creates those low speed numbers. The amount of bleed is what creates grip in your car. So the bleed has to be correct, or the car's going to give up as the moisture content changes, as the environment that it races in changes. The car will basically have different personalities. Bleed can make grip on both ends. A lot of bleed can make grip. A little bleed can make grip. That's something that we've covered in some of that video force traction. And maybe we'll cover more of that in some private videos, or maybe even some public stuff later. But zero is not something that shows on a valving chart, okay? So this is 0 is what we call a gorilla fist. Okay, and that's just the name that we gave. It doesn't really mean anything other than it's a name we gave that shock, gorilla fist, because it was strong. And our gorilla fist, our 0 shock started at 200, really at 3, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. We're not really, it's not like you have to own one of each. We're using that range to tune for different scenarios. Maybe a guy wants to run a little more spring, has to run a little more spring. This is based on a certain valve build. So we have a 500 based on a 14 valve rebound. We also have a 500 based on a 16 valve rebound. Right now we call it a right front GF 500. When on the 16, we call it a right front GF2 500. So it's a different rebound. It would be kind of like having a 200-pound spring and a 250-pound spring and putting 200 pounds of preload on each spring. So each spring both has 200 pounds of preload, but they're two different spring rates, okay? That's what is also happening, is going to happen in the future more. It's not happening very much from us, but it's going to happen in the future more. There's going to be different levels of gorilla fist stuff. 0 point. So 0, a long time was explained as the amount of effort it took to move the shock. So that made a little sense when it was 35 pounds. Now that it's like 500 pounds or 500 number, it doesn't make any sense that it'd take 500 pounds to make the shock move, because we couldn't, physically make it move, and we can. So what 0 is it's a dyno thing that's created. It's a little hard to explain, but you're creating energy in the shock. The valve stack opens and it closes, and on the close, it closes before it gets to 0, okay? And that pressure is what's left over, and that pressure is greater than the bleed is going to make on the other side. So it creates a 0 point, okay? That's the kind of technical terminology. The easier to understand thing would be, as the 0 increases, the rebound in the shock works harder and harder and harder. So we can take the same stack, preload it different, create a more 0 point, and that makes that shock work harder. Okay, it ties it down harder. So that's 0. 0 can be done in many, many ways. And the current trend right now is linear digressive. So you're going to see a lot of low speed, minimal amounts of high speed, and it doesn't always make, and minimal amounts of bleed. It doesn't always make for the best shock. If the racetrack is as smooth as this countertop, it'd make for a great shock. But on dirt and a lot of asphalt tracks have a lot of whoops, have a lot of elevation change in them. California, where they're racing NASCAR this weekend, you'll see them cars go down the back straightaway doing all this. That's not a smooth racetrack, even though it's asphalt, and it would blow the stack or blow the spring off. The spring would blow the stack off. So some of the linear digressive stuff, it is what it is. You guys all do what you do. We're just going to do it different. So we're not using a lot of linear digressive. We're kind of getting off the subject, but we do a 0 point. We do 0 with bleed. The car responds very well to it. That's why we continue to do it. And we add rebound to a car to make a car turn. So the tighter the car gets, the more rebound the car is going to need to make it turn. So the harder you push the tires forward, the more the tires want to shear that and not turn. They want to go straight. And rebound is one way of overcoming that. It's creating load in the front tire. There's other ways to create load in the front tire, front geometry. You can skew up the caster camber or the camber to create turn in the car. I don't like that as much. because it physically takes tire off the racetrack. Okay, so there's theories that explain that. We're getting off subject again. But in valving, this was supposed to be valving basic. And there's so much to it, we could go on for another hour. There's just a lot to how the valving affects the race car. Okay, but quick review, what we have is we have high speed, we have low speed, and we have zero. Okay, and these three things make up valving. How it's called out is going to be dependent on your shock builder. Okay, in today's world, the high-speed number is of very little information. It is the number that racers generally want to see. So it is the number that you generally want to see. But I can't preach it enough that you need to learn these other numbers. You need to learn more terminology, because that's how we need to express. Now, I did see a shock the other day where it come in with bleed size and a 10-inch number in pounds. So we do a little of that too, but the 10-inch number was like 80 on compression, 300 on rebound, and it had a 40 bleed in it. Okay, this is starting to, I mean, that's good information. That company was putting out a little information, and everybody thinks, oh, they're giving away their numbers, oh, this and that. No, it's the piston design that makes the shock good or bad. It's the piston design. It's not the number that the dyno creates that makes it good. And also remember, just because it looks good on the dyno doesn't mean it's going to race well. Until we can put tires and wheels on that dyno and race the dyno is a tool to help us guide us down this path of building shocks. That's all it is. Okay, sometimes we love it, sometimes we hate it. And now we've introduced other tools to also use to evaluate that shock. We do pull tests, we do a compression test, or drop test. So we do a pull test for like the rebound stuff, we do a drop test for the compression stuff. So maybe we'll do some videos on that to show you what we got going on. Honestly, we will, but it's not going to come quick. So just remember that. So valving is very important. I'm sorry to keep going on. It's important that we learn the new terminology in valving. High speed, low speed, zero. This is where it's all at. If you don't understand, watch this again. I'm going to try to put some charts in here and stuff so you guys can really get some good information. Help us out, share, like, and comment, okay? Tell your friends about our videos, what we got going on. If you have ideas, let me know. Give me some ideas, because I don't know what you guys don't. I know what I know, and a lot of times people tell me that you know, I think it's simple because I've been doing it for such a long time that I start to think that you all know it already. So I don't know what you don't know. So help me out by telling me what you don't know. Don't be afraid to put a comment in there. Ain't no comment bad. They're all good. I love them all. I try to answer them all. So subscribe to our page, hit the notification so when we do a video, you can see it. You know, you'll know it's there. So continue to watch, guys. The last of a 6-part series, valving, probably the most complicated one, but watch it a couple times. If we missed something, let me know and we'll cover it. I appreciate you guys. See you at the racetrack, and remember, go fast.